Those were the days.
Hey everyone, Justin Lee Howard here with another edition of Those Were the Days Extended. And today I am going to take you back to one of our favorite characters, and that, of course, is Mr. Eric Brady here, if you can see that photo. And take you back to July 27th, 1997, when Eric Brady sort of returned to Salem in the form of Jensen Ackles. And this is, of course, when they sort of sourced him and Sammy. They brought Sammy back to the show about, I think, 3 years or 4 years earlier, and they sort of kept Eric in Colorado until they really had a storyline for him. And then this is when they chose to bring him back in the summer of 1997. Of course, again, I've been living in Colorado with Marlena's parents for the last few years, while sort of Marlena, John, Roman, and everyone was sort of going through their craziness. So yeah, this was sort of Jensen Ackles, who has always been a fan favorite of the show. He was only, when you think about it, it's funny, he was only on the show really for about 3 years with the story. Sort of was with Nicole and Greta at that time. He spent a lot of scenes with Sammy. Initially, they were playing up when he came on the fact that like he had some resentment towards John. That honestly quickly sort of went away. I think they decided they didn't want sort of two siblings. Sammy at the time, of course, has always had, stick up her ass about John. And so I think they didn't want to repeat that with Eric, but they did a little bit. It took a little bit of him warming up to John because, Roman was back at this time. Roman was not back at this time, but John was with Marlena, and his father was sort of off at the ISA and kind of dealing with that as a sort of the end of his teenage years here. So yeah, that was Jensen. He definitely made a lasting impression on folks. Even, like I said, he was only on for 3 years, but people still to this day reference him. They still to this day like what he did on the show. And of course, he's sort of branched out after it and become a huge star at the moment. But because of this, I kind of didn't want to just go through Eric's sort of life in Salem or bigger plot points. I decided to kind of go through his love life a little bit. And again, when I first sat down, the thought came to my mind, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to do the love life thing because it's really Nicole and maybe like I was like, oh, maybe a couple other people, and then I really started thinking, and then the other names started popping up in my head, and I was like, okay, this actor or the character Sorest has been on the show now almost 30 years. I was like, he actually has had a lot of love interests, some of them popular, some of them not. So as I started doing, I was like, oh, you know what? He actually has had a good amount of relationships and romances throughout the years. Like I said, some popular than others. But I thought I'd take like a brief like synopsis through it. Of course, we know Nicole is the love of his life, and that's how they always portrayed it. Me personally, I am. If you watch our show, I'm not the biggest Eric and Nicole cheerleader. I think what Jensen and Ari had in the late 90s was really great. I think what happened is they kept him off canvas too long. So when he eventually came back as Greg Vaughn, and we'll get into those relationships, it was almost 15 years later. And I think they kept trying to duplicate what they had or what Ari had with Jensen back then. And for me, I actually thought that was a mistake. You know me, I'm a big Nicole and EJ fan. I thought that they, out of those two couples, I thought that they had the most significant relationship. They were married multiple times. They've gone through lost children. They've gone through the ups and downs, kidnappings. They've schemed together. They've schemed against each other, that sort of a thing. So I always preferred them together and always preferred Eric with someone else. But the powers that be have always sort of kept them in each other's orbit, and we'll go through that as we find out that Nicole, even if Eric was in a relationship or she was in a relationship, those feelings were still there and they always lingered, and it always sort of, in my opinion, sabotaged the other relationships that they were in. So like I said, I don't mind them together. I loved when Jensen was with Ari in that in that relationship. I liked Ari and Greg Vaughn too. I think that the powers that be rely too heavily on these characters were each other's first loves, so they have to be together. And I don't necessarily subscribe to that. You know me. For me, you have to show me why at different stages of people's lives why they're together. You can't just rely on they've been together 20 years or they were together 20 years ago or they were each other's first loves. Like I don't necessarily always agree with that or buy it. But yeah, we're kind of going to take a little walk down memory lane with Eric's romances. I'm not going to get too deep into a synopsis, but I'm just kind of going to give you my thoughts on these relationships and just sort of yay or nay, or if I thought they were popular or if they were popular or yeah. So some of these actually might surprise you. Maybe your thoughts in the comments. Sort of let me know what you guys think of these relationships because they're very varied and weird. And like there's a couple that are like out of nowhere where it was like, oh, that's right, Eric and this person were in a relationship together. How I completely forgot that. But to start off, we are going to start with from the beginning with Jensen Ackles and sort of the love triangle that really started this. As I said, if you remember back then, he sort of met Nicole when kind of both him and Sammy actually discovered Nicole. She was a waitress at the Salem Place, the outdoor mall they used to have in the 90s. He met Nicole. She was a waitress, and he was working as a photographer for Countess Wilhelmina. He helped her become a model. At this time, she was sort of torn between Eric, the nice guy, and then Lucas, who came in. He was the rich guy, and Nicole actually did like Lucas too. I know there's a lot of this, not rewrites, but people forget that she was a bit torn between Eric and Lucas. I think Lucas was sort of showering her with money, but Eric was a nice, sensitive guy who sort of, helped her out and helped her become a model. So there was a lot of push and pull there. Again, we know what Nicole was tempted by Kate to marry Lucas for $5 million. So that sort of ended that ended the Nicole and Eric sort of courtship early on. Then Eric started dating Greta. We know Greta von Umberg, Princess Gina's daughter here. And their fit was very much like, these are the two nice people coming together and dating, and they had a nice relationship. But again, Nicole was sort of always lingering in the background, even though she was married to Lucas at the time. And it slowly started to become a more of an arranged marriage than actually out of love and care. So Nicole was sort of, always sort of, again, lurking in the background. He had unresolved feelings for her. So much so that if you remember, Eric ended up cheating on Greta. He gave in his feelings. He cheated on Greta, slept with Nicole. He got actually so guilty of it. He actually I think Greta dumped him or was willing to work with him. He was so guilty about it. He sort of left town, and that sort of ended Jensen's sort of 3-year run on the show. Like I said, I think they took like this period of time and sort of imposed it onto 15 years later with these two, where yeah, they had a relationship, and yeah, you could probably say they were most likely each other's first loves. I don't know if that would have carried them into being, mid 30 somethings with everything that they had happened over the years. Eric went on to be a successful photographer through the years. And when he came back as Greg Vaughn, he came back as a priest. And again, we watched Nicole through those 15 years, through her ups and downs with various men, whether it was Brady or Daniel or Victor and EJ and all of those, and Charles and Tribulation she went through. So I don't know. To me, it didn't always seem true that they would naturally come back to each other. Maybe there was always some curiosity or sort of the one that got away, but I don't know about necessarily always shoving them together, even when there were, I think, other people that they were far more suited for than each other. So yeah, that's my little hot take on the early years of sort of Eric and Nicole here. But then we'll move on to something a relationship that kind of was surprising. And I got to tell you, I think at the time was with it. It wasn't something I would ever have thought about for putting these two characters together. And I think because until Greg Vaughn came on the show, there's a little bit of you'll see in a second, there's a little bit of an age gap with these two, but not significant. But I think because thinking of Eric as Jensen Ackles, I would have never thought to put these two characters together. But when Greg Vaughn came in, and sort of what he brought to the role, I think it kind of worked. And that, of course, is, you guys remember, that is the Jennifer Eric relationship. If you guys remember that, it wasn't a huge part, but it was significant enough that it started at one point and then picked up after he came back to the show. They sort of started as they bonded over, I in a weird way, sort of substance abuse. Remember, Jennifer was having her issues with substance abuse. Eric was having his issues with drinking a lot. They sort of got together, and it was sort of like they sort of had this like steamy one night stand. And then right after that, as things were sort of brewing, they that's when Eric drove drunk and killed Daniel in the accident. He went to prison for a couple of years, got out early. Then that's when he came back to Salem that he sort of reignited this relationship with Jennifer. And it was very much, I don't want to say they were trying to duplicate the Jack Jennifer stuff, but they were doing it from a different place that Eric is from. In terms of Eric was coming back, he had been to prison, he had been sober, he wasn't part of the priesthood anymore. He was sort of trying to find himself, and he had tremendous guilt. So he kind of wanted to stay away from Jennifer, or felt like he didn't deserve a relationship with someone like her, or didn't deserve a relationship with really anyone. So again, it was a little bit of a push and pull there. With their romance, and a little bit again of then I feel like trying to duplicate like the Jennifer Jack kind of dynamic, which again was different than this, but I felt like they were trying to throw obstacles in these two as opposed to sort of putting them together like the two nice people they deserve. It was sort of a lot of internal conflict with these two getting together. What sort of ultimately broke them up was, again, Nicole strikes again. Nicole was sort of blackmailed and leaving town by Brady. Jennifer knew something was up, but she didn't know what it was. She later found out from Eve that Nicole was blackmailed. She actually kept it from Eric. And these two actually were engaged at the time. She kept it from Eric. Eric later found out that she knew. He ended the relationship. She kind of went, or they were sort of in turmoil a bit. She knew that proved that sort of he still had these strong feelings for Nicole and really would always sort of want her. So they sort of ended amicably from it, but it stemmed from the fact that she was sort of keeping a little bit of a lie, or, sort of omitting the truth from him to kind of hold on to him a bit. And he honestly, at the time, wasn't really being honest about his feelings about Nicole, even though she wasn't around. Her leaving in such an abrupt way had an effect on him and really affected his relationship with Jennifer. So yeah, this is a couple that, like I said, I don't know if the audience really loved this couple together. But I have to say, I did, thinking back on it and sort of how it was split up, where they started and had sort of this steaminess and they sort of bonded over substance abuse. And Jennifer was taking pills, he was drinking a lot. It was sort of not a good match first time. But him coming back, I actually found that I didn't mind them as a couple as much, sort of when, again, they had their quote unquote sort of 1.5 or second round of being together. I actually thought it was okay. I wouldn't have minded. I think, Jennifer is forever cemented with Jack. But if things change in the future, I wouldn't mind a revisit of this maybe. So yeah, that moves us to our next Eric couple here, and that of course was with a good girl Sarah Horton here. I'd say the big obstacles in this relationship, in the beginning, again, this was another two nice people coming together. Eric had sort of sorted out his stuff. Nicole wasn't as much of an option here, but what they sort of relied on to give this couple conflict was really Rex Brady. We find out that shortly after Sarah got to town, that she was involved with Rex and that he was sort of coming back and sort of wanting her back, and that she was developing feelings for Eric at the time, and Eric was developing feelings for her. And then, Rex and Eric are brothers, so that had an effect on it. And Sarah ultimately felt guilty and ended up going back to Rex at one point. They ended up getting married, then divorced. And, I'd say their next biggest obstacle was the fact that after they broke up, Sarah found out she was pregnant with Mackenzie, of course. And that sort of, again, gave them a sort of weird twist to their dynamic. He was sort of trying to mend things with Nicole. She knew the truth that Eric was the father. That, again, messed up their relationship for the 15th time. I feel like the writers always had a pattern with them. They wanted to put Eric and Nicole together, but they also wanted to give Eric another option. And it just this couple was nice, but ultimately I want to say kind of forgettable. I think the thing that bonds them together, and they've become good friends, which is nice. But like I said, the thing that bonds them is the fact that they were parents to Mackenzie, Brady slash Wharton, who eventually passed away. But yeah, that's something that will always bond them. And these are two good people who was sort of maybe wrong time, kind of wrong place. I think in a different time in each other's lives, they would have been an okay couple. I liked them. I wasn't crazy about them, but I liked Eric and Sarah together. But yeah, that brings us to another of his sort of last relationship on screen that we've seen, and that, of course, is with Jada. This one was, what do I say about this one? This is very much a what could have been. I feel like they started off this couple sort of hot and heavy. I think with Aaliyah coming in and establishing her character as this nonsense cop. She was good at what she does. She, was Marcus's daughter, so she had a bit of a connection to a couple different people here in Salem. But I think sort of putting her with Eric on surface wasn't a bad idea. I just wish they really invested in them. I think it was too soon after his latest go round with Nicole and their breakup. He still had 1 foot in, 1 foot out in this relationship. I think what will always bond them too is the fact that they were sort of pregnant together. She, again, we know, had the abortion, decide to terminate the pregnancy and sort of move on with things. I think she saw the writing on the wall with Nicole, but I don't know, this relationship, it was nice when it started, but I feel like the writers, powers that be, never really invested in them, unfortunately. So yeah, sort of cute couple, they look good together. They're both incredibly attractive people. I think we wanted some I think at the time we were sort of getting sick of the go round with Eric and Nicole, and we wanted Eric to be happy. And we thought, oh, great, there's this new character on, someone with a clean slate. But like I said, the powers that be never really invested in them, I think, as a couple, unfortunately. So yeah, that was kind of the Eric and Jada very brief romance. And next, we are going to go to who this may be kind of controversial, but this, I actually believe, is probably my favorite Eric pairing. And I know a lot of people didn't always gel with this character. And I didn't initially, but I think once they put her with Eric, to me, was very surprising, but it kind of worked. And that, of course, is, we know where we go. That, of course, is Eric and Sloane, who, to me, it was a short amount of time in the scope of things, but actually to me had a very significant relationship. I think about this in terms of, I think Eric is one of those characters where really good guy at his core, but I think he likes a dynamic woman, similar to like Rafe. I feel like whenever they tried to put Rafe with quote unquote just the nice sort of kind girl, I think it didn't work. Same sort of similar with Eric. I think is as good of a person as he is, as much as they have made him the moral center in a lot of either relationships or situations. I think that he does like someone who's a little bit feisty, a woman who's a little bit take charge, and probably someone who can get into a bit of trouble. And we know he can sort of handle it from his, years of sort of dealing with Sammy and coming to sort of terms with who she was. I think it lent itself to this relationship. I also think that, to me, this is sort of, in a weird way, and kind of go with me here, I think this is the relationship with Sloane, to me, is sort of a version of if Eric and Nicole had got together when Greg Vaughn first came back, or if they had gotten together in those intervening years before Nicole got to stay on the show and go on and have all this sort of life experience and all these different relationships and children and not children and all that kind of stuff. I feel like this is what that relationship would have looked like. And I think they tried to duplicate that a little bit with Sloane. I think her and Nicole are very similar in a lot of ways. That's why I think Eric was just attracted to her. to me, when this came together, again, very surprising relationship. I was like, oh, they're putting sort of Sloane together. I think it did wonders for branching out her character and giving a little bit more depth to her. At this point, she had come on originally as sort of Alex's friend with benefits. Then she had branched out into the stuff with Chanel and her brother being on the show. And then I think she settled really into this role when they put her with Greg Vaughn. And I think they did love each other. They did get pregnant on their own. They had a miscarriage, unfortunately. That's sort of what fueled the idea of taking Nicole's baby. They had the baby switch here, but still, even through all this, when it was Eric and Sloane and then EJ and Nicole, I don't know about you guys, we talked about on the show, I was very much a keep them separate. Let Nicole stay with EJ and let Eric stay with Sloane. I think it was, like I said, I think she ultimately was the better match for him. I think it was a lot of, like I said, wasted potential here, unfortunately. I wouldn't, I like the character of Sloane. I know that she wasn't always the most popular with a lot of fans, but yeah, I was a big fan of this relationship here. And now, of course, it seems like we might be getting another not redo of this, but we know if you've been watching the show, they've been hinting at a lot of trouble in paradise for Eric and Nicole. Don't know, but I think Greg Vaughn may be coming back to the show or heading his way back. It seems like that's what the hints are telling us. I wouldn't be surprised if at this point we know that Ari is most likely not coming back to the show. We know why. I wouldn't be surprised if they recast Nicole and sort of gave them another shot there in Salem, or if they brought, if they're bringing Eric back and decide to sort of give him a new life and new love interest. We'll see. I just hope that whatever it is that they commit to it, I think that what has held the Eric character back in terms of finding another possible love interest is that they've always kept Nicole in the back pocket, or they've always kept Nicole right here off to, stage left kind of a thing, and always had those feelings lingering. So I don't know, whatever they do, I feel like if they're going to bring him back, recast Nicole, make them a married couple and let them be happy for a while, or have them break up, bring back Eric back to the show, and have him move on in a really significant way. But we'll see. Again, have no idea. It just seems like they're hinting that the character of Eric may be coming back. Fingers crossed. That's great. I think Greg Vaughn deserves to come back. I think that the situation with Ari was unfortunate, and I think he sort of was a little bit of collateral damage there. So if he is coming back, I'm glad. And he gets a chance to sort of explore Eric with or without Nicole. We'll see. But yeah, that was sort of my trip down memory lane with Eric's love life. It's funny when I sometimes put these videos together, I'm trying to find the narrative and look at the angle, and really is doing the research. Because originally I was like, I completely dismissed it, and I was like, there's not enough for me to talk for 20 minutes about Eric, his love life. And then I thought, I was like, oh no, he was with Sarah briefly, and then the Jennifer stuff, and I always knew I was gonna briefly talk about Nicole and of course Sloane, but yeah, you kind of forget when you have these sort of pocket relationships for this character. But yeah, thanks everyone, and I will see you on the next one. Take care. Bye.
Those were the days.